Hello, everyone. Great to share the stage with all of you. Um, First, let me start with introducing our esteemed guest. I'm sure that everyone in the room knows who is sitting on the table, but let me just take a chance. So, first we have Mr. Ritesh Bhai. We call Ritesh is the tallest banker in the industry. He's been, shaping up the whole fintech and banking partnership journey since I would say 2015. I would say every single fintech unicorn that you see in India today, it has Ritesh fingerprints and his work in that. So welcome Ritesh to this panel. Would love to ask you insightful question. Ritesh is now heading the global payments at PhonePe, and we're all proud of what PhonePe has done in India. And now look forward to Ritesh's next journey in the global payment landscape. Next we have Mr. Arif Khan. Most of you will know that Arif has been instrumental in making sure that what is happening when we scan a QR code, when we send a payment to someone, magically money gets from my bank account to someone else. What's the magic behind it? Not just the innovation part, but the scale part. If we look at it, I would say there is no other platform in the world who can handle this much scale, and Arif has been instrumental in playing that. Arif is now leading the innovation in the most exciting payment company in India, which is Razorpay. Welcome, Arif, to the panel. And then we have Mr. Narasimhan sir. He's been a career payment executive, leading companies like Ingenico, now at Worldline and Tech Processes. We'll be asking you, sir, questions about how can we, learn from this, the decades-old companies and take a few learnings from that in our developing fintech ecosystem. Next, we have Mr. David Matthews, who has been heading the financial services for Commonwealth in UK, representing that in India. I believe, David, you've been in India for a long time, so you know our industry well, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in this panel as well. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the panel. To start with, the big question, right? We take a few years back in 2016, 2017, demonetization, UPI just coming in. Now, UPI is part of the life. Every day you wake up, every day you transact. And I believe that not just us, the world believes in that India's payment success story. The biggest question is that how can we replicate, how can we take this innovation on the global stage and share that it's happening, right? Real-time payments in India, at the stage that they are, there are still the countries who are lagging a lot behind. So to start with you, Ritesh, right? Now you are heading the global payments. In India, PhonePe is UPI, UPI is PhonePe. We look forward to seeing PhonePe in Dubai. We look forward to seeing it in Europe, in Singapore. I know there has been a lot of development that has happened. The team has been working out, but somehow it still feels that where is UPI on the global stage? So can you please share your insights on what's the progress, what's the way ahead, how PhonePe is leading this charge and taking this humongous task of taking UPI on the global scale?
So thank you, Bhavik, for this and for the kind words that you said about me. I'm coming to the point. I mean, like you mentioned, UPI is very synonymous with payments. I mean, I have traveled quite a few countries, and when you say UPI, it does not need any more further introduction or explanation around it, right? It's the first homegrown domestic ecosystem, which we are now taking externally. Traditionally, if you see, we have always been following what has been happening in the West, right? So while UPI is something which is well accepted by every Indian today, right? Internationally, when we go, and there have been already 7 countries where it has all been activated, right? And we work very closely with NPCI. So the moment NPCI goes and activates any new geography, we actually follow them and start doing a lot of on-ground integrations, right? While UPI is big for India, when you go internationally, and again, I'm just saying that it's a perspective that every country has, right? So for them, it's just any other payment methodology, because that country is any which way is accepting a Master, Visa, Amex, China Union Pay, all of that. So UPI becomes one more. So the challenges that we have seen is, First and foremost, the kind of handshakes that we end up doing, okay? The 7 countries that have been activated, each one has a different genre. So in certain cases, NPCI will go and do a handshake with a network equivalent over there, right? Like in Nepal and Sri Lanka, which I feel is the right method. Because when you actually talk at a network level, automatically all the members become part of the ecosystem. So that's ideally the prescribed way in which we should go. And we are seeing success in those kind of geographies, right? The second kind of engagement is where they go and talk directly to some of the aggregators, which means I have to go and start creating handshake with every large aggregator till the time you reach a critical mass. A lot of overheads, right? A lot of time spent in education, etc. But that's how it is. The third is where they go and talk to regulators and do a handshake. That becomes a big challenge, right? Regulators traditionally are there to play the role of an enabler. They cannot drive a business. So wherever in geographies we have seen that the handshakes have been built via the regulator, the penetration or the acceptance becomes a challenge, right? The second part, what we have seen is the transaction limits, especially in countries where the Indian currency is slightly inferior. For example, if I were to go into a UAE or a Singapore, the 1 lakh daily limit doesn't make much sense. So I think that definitely needs a refresh. I mean, and there have been enough representations and submissions been made. I hope, better sense will prevail very soon. Third, I think the RuPay CC that needs to be activated. While it has been enabled in the domestic ecosystem, I think activating it at a global level will definitely give it a uptick, right? The point is today, for large ticket size, an Indian traveler will definitely end up using a credit card as compared to using his bank account. So I think these, and then of course there's a lot of on-ground education, visibility, branding, hand-holding that we need to do both at an aggregator level, merchant level, doing a lot of decaling exercises. Many a times if you go into some of the Southeast Asian countries, UPI is mistaken for Union Pay International. So you have to start from that angle as to, what it actually means. So, like I said, so it's a collective effort. Both NPCI is also leading the charge. We are also, working with them to create that visibility. So this becomes one part when we talk about the international payments. The other part is where we as a company are planning to be part of the mainstream in some of these geographies, going in for our own license, etc. So there the challenges that we see is like in India, we are like spoiled for choices, right? I mean, because we have a very robust digital public infrastructure, that becomes a big handicap in some of the geographies. So in absence of these, a lot of the transactions that we talk about being done in a self-service mode is a distant reality, right? And the other challenges, of course, remain the compliance, because you'll have to tweak your products and solutions as per each regulations of those countries. I think the incumbent players, that challenge still remains. And of course, your digital literacy and digital financial literacy, those things on ground continue to remain the challenge. But then I guess when you want to be part of the global ecosystem, you literally have to punch above your weight to, ensure that you get success.
Thanks, Ritesh. So just to take on it, right? What we feel like is that, we all know that UPI got launched in 2016, right? But there was a decade of efforts that was put behind before taking it live. Is it safe to say that we are kind of in that similar journey than the few years down the road? We will see these things happening and people like me, whenever traveling internationally, we can just, flash out our PhonePe app and start paying. What does this future look like in a few years, right? Once this hard work of integrating, going through the hurdles of compliance and processes, how do we see it, right? Can you share how can we imagine that future with PhonePe in Dubai and Singapore?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the whole idea and that's the intent with which we are going there, right? Like I said, a few tweaks here and there to the existing offerings will itself give us a better uptake as far as the consumption is concerned. Like, even if we were to just activate the RuPay CC for international transaction, that itself will help us compete with the credit card spends which happen. So once a person has a comfort that this particular financial instrument is good enough for me to be able to transact digitally in any part of the geography that I go, I mean, today when you travel with a Master or a Visa card, okay, you know for sure that you will never face it. Why? Because that's a comfort that you have derived. I think it's all about trying to get all the relevant players into the ecosystem, get the buy-in, get the education done, and then naturally have those enablers in place of, either increasing the existing limits, adding more use cases on top of what is being done. Because while we are talking about the P2M payments, right, there are 2 or 3 other areas as well in which there will be a reverse acceptance that will happen. So the apps in those geographies will also be accepted at the merchant locations here. So that should give a bilateral kind of an arrangement. Second is India, traditionally is a large remittance receiving corridor. So the inward remittances is something again that can come in. I think the NRE, NRO accounts on international numbers to be enabled. So there are 4 or 5 aspects to the overall UPI journey going abroad. Like, adding more cases, use cases to it will also give you that much needed impetus to ensure that the consumption is driven.
Thanks a lot. Sure.
Check. I just want to add to what Ritesh said, because I did work in the Middle East for about a year and a half. One of the largest remittances to India, I mean, India is a country that receives the largest remittances globally, comes from the unskilled, semi-skilled workers in the Middle East, right? And if we can extend something like a UPI to them at, whatever, zero cost or very minuscule cost, it makes a huge difference to them because they really work physically very hard in a very, very grueling environment. They probably earn something like about 5,000-6,000 dirhams a month, and out of which they repatriate maybe 3,000, 4,000 dirhams every month back to their families in India. If that can be facilitated through UPI, probably the best thing that can happen, because then they're not really paying an outrageous cost, because when they use private service providers, they pay an outrageous cost. And it's much simpler, it's instantaneous, right? And it's such a huge population, whether you take Far East, Singapore, Indian expat workers, Middle East. So all these are great destinations to put the remittance angle to it as well, which UPI can really help and enable them. And, kind of do financial inclusion on a global scale for our people at least. I think it's a wonderful use case.
And just one further follow-up, just on international profile and how foreign governments see UPI. I've been here for 2.5 years. I know it very well. I've traveled around the country. Whenever we have visitors from London, we introduce them to the unified payments interface. They go to a market, they use the QR code, they say how wonderful it is. And yeah, congratulations, it's a successful system. 400 million users, billions of transactions, so well done. But there's a lot of work to do. If you go to London and you say UPI, no one will know what you're talking about. I came here to the Global Fintech Festival in, I think it was the end of August. Hugely successful festival like this one, but very domestically focused. So I think one of the big challenges is how do you connect internationally? So part of it is profile and marketing, and how you engage with those markets and how you reassure those markets. Some of the things we've heard here about UPI, about the safety measures you put in, the anti-fraud measures, anti-money laundering, cybersecurity, all these things, European regulators, UK regulators won't know this, and they'll be worried. So that's part of your challenge, is its profile, and also reassuring other markets that this dynamic 400 million people using system works well in India, but it will work well internationally as well.
Thanks, David. So just on that note, right, you've been driving the policy changes, regulatory framework, in India and both in UK and also in other countries, right? When we look at UK, is the most advanced financial ecosystem in the world, right? And suddenly India just started building UPI, right? And things started changing, and kind of, the Asian payments started moving on the QR codes and these newer technologies. But those lessons that, UK has learned over the years when it comes to the security, the real-time payments, making sure the compliance is in place. In this new world order, I would say, in the payment industry, right, where every country is building something domestically, what you and your team is doing between this corridor between India and UK on the partnership or driving regulatory change? For example, remittance, right? Ramesh sir, UK, of course, is also a big, net output. We get a lot of remittance from UK. Ideally, I would like to, send money from here to there, just using PhonePe on the other hand, right? But it has challenges, right? Money moving from my bank to UK and then just, there it comes with a second order effect, may it chargeback or preventing frauds, protecting users. What are your views and what are some changes that, or the developments that's happening in between this UK and India corridor?
Yeah, I think it's a very good, important question. I mean, look, once you go outside of India and look at fintech, it's a different space from 10 years ago. That's first of all the good news. There's lots. Every market is different. Every country is different. There's no uniform regulation covering everything. I think going forward, we're not going to see that in 2025. I think there will be a big drive coming from the US to deregulate more than regulate, which could influence particularly the European Union, who tends to have the strongest regulations. But in the UK, look, we've got a new government. We've got a Labour government. They've been in 6 months. They've settled in, so we have policy stability. I think that's really important when you're looking at a foreign market. And we're going to have that government for at least 4 or 5 years. Similar to you guys, you've got policy stability here. You've had your elections. You're sorted. They've established, I thought, which was really good, an all-political party working group on fintech, which is basically means that there's a consensus in the UK that this technology that is driving is really important. And I think if you look at the politics of this, we're in a 0% growth environment in the UK right now, 0 to 0.5%. And technology is a massive growth driver. And so we have to, the simple answer is maximize every opportunity to grow using technology. And one of the ways of doing that will be linking in to one of the world's, I would say, the emerging markets, largest growing economy, at roughly 6.5% in real terms, right? And as you say, we have 2 million Indian nationals, diaspora in the UK, who are very well connected. So all the things are in place. However, there's always a but. And, it's a challenge to link our payment system with India on a macro level. We're having a review in the UK to create a national payments architecture, which will provide legislation with which, under the new legislation, it will be easier to connect payments into India. But it's not been an easy process. You're lucky. I mean, you have a public payments interface. That's what UPI is, right? In Western economies, it's private sector, and it's very diffuse, and it's quite hard to bring them together. So we have a different system, so that will be a challenge in how we do that. I guess the other kind of bigger picture thing is our regulators, and you touched on it about regulatory challenges, and I wish you luck when you go to the UK. Our regulators have got a reputation for being thorough and being quite muscular, not too dissimilar from your regulators, but we haven't had the approach that the RBI have had in terms of the innovation hub and the fact that you've allowed the fintech environment to flourish. Ours has been a bit stricter. But the government has basically said to our regulator, and we had a conversation with the Chancellor a couple of weeks ago, and she said, look, you need to be positive to tech, to the regulator, but importantly, only regulate where you need to regulate. And if you have regulations that don't work, either revise the regulations or change the regulations. So we're entering a new era, I think, in the UK in terms of governance, where hopefully we'll have a much more market-friendly regulator, and we'll take the opportunities to kind of look at that growth. But I think the real driver is growth. And very quickly on the US, then look, it's a new era with the Americans. I think we all need to reflect on that. It'll have influence on all of us. If you saw the inauguration, look, it was no coincidence that all the tech billionaires were at the front and poor old Secretary of State was at the back. Deliberate, right? So this government is going to push tech aggressively around the world, probably with a very, very low regulatory approach. That could change the dynamics. And I see going forward some friction with the European Union. European Union has quite a lot of extensive regulation. They're very concerned about cybersecurity, very concerned about money laundering, very concerned about data sharing. So there will be tensions there going forward. But I think in terms of the UK, we're in a sweet spot. I mean, one of the advantages of leaving the European Union was that we can regulate ourselves. We don't need Europe to tell us what to do. So we need to take advantage of that and use our freedom from leaving. And yeah, 2 million Indians living in the UK, traveling regularly. It's a massive business opportunity. So yeah, very finally, we had an excellent national payments roundtable between the UK and India last year, at which we discussed these issues about connecting in closer. So we're getting there. And we're seeing companies innovate already connecting to the system on things like remittances, on things like foreign exchange, or things like SME financing. I think we'll get there. I'm bullish for 2025 on this sector and on UPI, and I think you will make more progress. Be self-critical about UPI, because it's a wonderful thing. I've already congratulated you on it. But if you don't self-criticize it and say, well, how can we make it better, then you won't be as dynamic as you can be in terms of linking with other markets. So be proud of it, but also be self-critical.
Thanks, David. It's just so heartful to see, right? On the global level, regulators, fintechs working together, trying to open these corridors. Thanks for this deep insights. Moving on, Arif sir, you've been building payment system for 15 years, right? 15, 20 years now. And you have seen the whole journey, how the money moves, and what, I mean, we didn't have technology when the payments were happening, right? Looking back and fast forward to 2025, you know, I mean, we have these homegrown platforms, you know, we have payment gateways and almost 9,000 plus fintechs and this vibrant ecosystem. Unfortunately, when we look at the, you know, the global names, the things come in mind are Stripe, Adyen. In India, the only payment gateway that we know are Razorpay, right? What's your view on that, right? Can we repeat the success story of Razorpay on a global payment side? What needs to be done there? Be it on the technology side, be it on making sure that fintechs get those opportunities to innovate and open this up. I mean, can we have a remittance payment gateway? What are your views on that?
Thanks, Bhavik. You know, we are between what I call network, lunch, and nicotine for me. So yeah, I'll try to spice this up a bit. I'll just step back, right? You used, you know, you said New World Order. I think when we talk about cross-border payments, I think we are talking about very peripheral stuff, right? It will happen over a period of time. People like PhonePe, ourselves will accelerate it. Maybe 5-year journey, maybe 3-year journey. Obviously, NPCI is working on it, right? But if you look at it, right, I think we have to ask ourselves as a country, right, where do we stand in the new world order, right? So look at it, right, and this is not to demotivate anybody, but for us to reflect, as you mentioned, right? So is there any OS made in India? No. Who controls? OS controls. Is there any silicon made in India? GPUs do we control? We don't control. Are we going to win the AI war if we don't control GPUs? Very unlikely. No one is going to give us GPUs, right? I know the AI mission is trying very hard. It's an upstreet battle, right? What happens, so where did GPS come from? US. You see those companies, what they're doing, right? Where did GSMA, these are standards. These are global standards, these are global protocols, right? Internet, right? Which are the companies leading? US. GSMA, which are the countries leading it? European countries, right? So all equipment comes from Finland and European countries, right? In all this, why am I talking about this? Having been on NPCI, bank, startup, been on some of the other committees, it requires deep thinking. We need to get into the value system in the right layer. If we stay on the edge, then we are talking not a lot of value creation as a larger ecosystem for the country. We may obviously make some money here and there, and that's the reason we do business. But if you look at large India, overall 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, then we need to become the OS layer of payments. What does that mean? That means we need to stop talking about UPI as an application or a mobile app, and we should start talking about UPI as a protocol. So, for example, you said companies like Stripe, great companies, right? No doubt about it. Visa, Master, great networks, right? But look at it, ISO did not come from India. Whatever we say, EMV did not come from India. The people who wrote it, the people who did the foundation layer of that are running the world. As far as that. So we need to make sure that yes, we talk about cross-border, you can accept payments in UK, you can do it in UAE and so on and so forth, and I've been part of it, right? I think the key is if that country, in spite of geopolitics, in spite of the sovereignty challenges that are there, adopts UPI as a protocol. If they start adopting UPI as a protocol, a lot of this gets solved, right? Let's take a step back. What's happening in the world, right? I mean, all of you would have followed G20, right? We were in the lead over there, etc. and all. So G20 and the World Bank, I mean, there are parts that meet. They came back saying, hey, how do we solve world remittance problem? It's an average of 7.5, don't hold me to it, right? 7.5% cost, below $200, let's bring it to $3 and all. But if you look at the annual report that came out around 3 or 4 months back, Actually, in some geographies, some corridors, the cost has gone up, right? So I think for us as a country, while we think about the larger global problem, we have to think where will we find ourselves in this seat, right? And unless we do not come up with a payment layer, which we are saying is like a OS of the payments, then we'll always be on the fringes. For example, in recent times, I mean, in the last decade and a half, one of the payment companies or network that has really stepped up and is now acceptable globally is China UnionPay. If I'm not mistaken, China UnionPay burned 15, 20 billion dollars to get where they are. And it took them a decade or decade and a half. Now, that kind of capital for a country like India at this stage is going to be very difficult to invest. So we have to find smarter and better ways, right? So we'll continue doing what we are doing, but we have to go back. So there is a program called Nexus. BIS is championing that, right? They talk about standardization of protocols. I kind of contributed to it in a certain way. Now that message packet is based on ISO 2020. Right? India is not on, for example, UPI is not on ISO 20, right? So there's a bridge. Now that's, and now I think RBI did a MOU, right? They tied up, there was an article which said that we have tied up, we are going to be a part of Nexus, and there are 4 or 5 countries, 1 European country. I think the question we have to ask that, okay, when these standards get set, how much influence do we have, right? I think if we are able to influence it, it's a great tick mark. It will be something that will help us in our battle. But if it stays the way it is and where we do not influence the standards, I think we'll just be a fringe player. So I'm sorry to, be kind of I know it's a very positive environment. I think we are in a good place, but we really need to step back and think deep, right? And I think that's the way to win these battles in the long term, right? So it's like a test match and not like an IPL. And I think we have to get there, in my view. And hence, why this protocol? I'll just take 30 seconds more, right? Look at it, right? If the protocol is adopted, say, hypothetically, UK, right? If David encourages it, what it allows companies like PhonePe, Razorpay, your erstwhile company, the new company that you are in, yourself, we could go and say, look, on this protocol, we've already built great solutions. Give us a chance. I think that's where we stand to win, right? So you look at which are the biggest card switches in the world. They're definitely not an Indian company. We didn't start it, so we are not there, right? But imagine if the protocol is UPI, anyone reviewing it over there, companies that are represented on this panel, they have a fair or of larger than fair chance to win because we've seen the numbers, we've seen scale, we've seen the complexity. We know how to handle small ticket transactions, which a lot of countries don't know how to do, right? I mean, we handle, 16 billion UPI transactions. A lot of it is small tickets. So all this will come to play. It gives Indian fintechs, it gives Indian technology company a chance to actually do an implementation solution over there, run the licenses over there, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to just step back and think a little deeper and say, hey, this is how we are going to go about it, right? And obviously this means the regulator, NPCI, fintech, startup, all of us together. I hope I was able to...
No, absolutely. So just on that note, Arif, right, when you initially wrote the protocols for the UPI, I vividly remember that it has been written as an open protocol, right? We have currency provisions, we have deep linking parameters.
Yeah.
What I believe is that UPI is talked a lot in the banking community, right? When it comes to the developer community, I think it is still a struggle, right? I should be able to go online, get the documentation and build things on my own. I know we have an app layer and market dynamics are in the play, but do you think, will it help if we open UPI to the developer community in the world and they can start building things around it?
I think that's a question for NPCI to answer and the regulator and not me. But having said that, I think we need to again break it in two, right? See, UPI largely, today we are talking about flow of money. Actually, UPI protocol is for flow of value. It doesn't matter whether it's a rupee account, dollar account, a credit account, or even a stable coin behind, or a Bitcoin behind, it doesn't matter, right? It's if you remember those days when we wrote it, it's all about value movement. It can carry value. Most countries, including India, for financial money movement is a regulated structure, right? And rightfully so. I don't think so. And I think that's where you can't just open it up. Right? And that's where if you open the protocol and some countries adopt it, maybe there'll be more developer community coming in. What I just mentioned, see, the beauty of UPI, it's extremely light, it's extremely flexible. So it's not a challenge to adopt. In fact, for the India-Singapore corridor pay now, there is an adapter of ISO 2022 that UPI has adopted. So I think that enrichment power is already there, right? It's available and people are doing it, and that's how companies like PhonePe, Razorpay are hacking it, right? I mean, hacking in the legitimate way, yeah, in the nice way, right? So I don't think that's the challenge. Whether we'll ever open source it, if that's your question, I think maybe.
Not even open source, sir. It should be that I should be able to fire a deep link and get a response back. I should be able to just change the currency code and start.
So Bhavik has been having these conversations from the last 5 years with me when I was at NPCI also. Right?
Can I just make it's a very sort of political comment about this? So obviously there's the technological barriers which we discussed, but I think that look at the bigger picture on this, and this reflects on a lot of the challenges that India faces. It's an emerging market economy, and from the perspective of Western countries, it still suffers from emerging market bias in a number of ways, not just this sector, lots of sectors, lots of politics. So you have to reflect on that and just recognize the kind of world that we're in. We're in an, still largely a Pax Americana with a lot of control from them, with multilateral institutions that are largely Western control. So the political answer to the question is there probably is a sweet spot for India to market this kind of thing to the global south. When we as diplomats go to multilateral forums, India is increasingly a powerful voice of the global south and leading in a lot of ways the global south. You're in a sweet geopolitical situation right now, so you can take advantage of it. So that would be my advice on that. Competing always with Western countries can be a false level playing field, so take advantage of what power you're growing in other areas.
Thanks. Definitely agree with you on this. Yeah, go ahead, Arif, please.
And look at it, right? So suppose PhonePe does say $1 billion cross-border. We do $5 billion cross-border, and maybe you also do another $3-4 billion, right? Say $10 billion altogether. Great, we've enabled $10 billion cross-border transaction. How is the money settlement happening? SWIFT. You're playing SWIFT. Who's where in the value chain should be evident with that, right? So I think somewhere when we talk about New World Order, since you mentioned it, and then we, obviously the globe is now divided, there is a South. I think the South needs to think about it. That, hey, do we need a different protocol that suits us? Or do we force fit something, right? Why can't two geographies, and since you're on the stage, open books to each other? Why do I necessarily need this double conversion happening, right? Why can't I have open trade books and net off? Because a lot of your value or a lot of the pricing that the customer faces is because of this. A lot of it is because, so if there is a 6% cost, I think you can easily say 20% is because of the credit and liquidity risk, and maybe 20-25% is the FX fluctuation risk, and another 15-20% in just the conversion. So if you want to bring it from 6% to 2, 2.5%, 3%, if that's your aim, then you have to unbundle it. And I think that's where the deeper thinking is required in my view. Not that you're wrong, I completely understand where you're coming from, but I think some of us have to step back and say, hey, this is where we'll really do the long-term hack.
Understood. So I think if I have to sum it up, from all of that, that we keep asking ourselves a lot of time in our offline conversation is that where is our own messaging system, right, that plays on the global world, right? And call it a protocol, call it a Swift replacement. I think that next step, hopefully one day, we see a fintech taking on this task, humongous task, building our own interoperable payment messaging system for the global trade. Thanks a lot. Moving on to the next section, I have to be cognizant of the time. But just related on this line, right? Like I said, we have 9,000 fintech players in India who are actively, doing business and it's I would say one of a kind ecosystem in the world where banks, regulators, technology companies are working together. I don't think we don't have any landscape anywhere in the world. I mean, if you go in the US, we don't have this ecosystem like this. But I come across the companies building from India for India every single day. Someone is starting up. But still, there is, I would say, and blames to the founders like me, right? Like when we start building things, for us, India is a large domestic market, easy to raise money as well when you're building a fintech in India. But do you guys see, and there are a few daring startups who are building from India for the world. I think we are there, right? Be it in terms of the support, be it in terms of the talent that we have. investment has not been a challenge also, right, in fintech industry. What is stopping the entrepreneurs from building, global payment companies, global, you know, I'll keep the credit aside for now, but global fintech companies from India. Starting with you, Ritesh, you've been interacting with a lot of startups. Can you please share some stories of companies innovating, building things at the global scale?
I think four very distinct areas, at least which I have observed, right? One is, I think, cross-border remittances. And when I'm saying cross-border, I would say payments and remittances put together. I think that is going to be the next flavor for sure. And I'm talking of both P2P and B2B kind of transactions. So if you see the current market size, right, on the P2P side is around 900 billion and growing at a CAGR of 6 to 7% year on year. There is scope. The traditional method of assisted still far outnumbers the self-service mode. So I think you will need more efficient solutions, right? To your point, tech could be one of the solutions. But when it comes to cross-border and to the point that Arif also mentioned, there has to be a second leg, which is the settlement. That also becomes very critical. So whenever fintech, so the word fintech also is preceded with finance first, right? So the point is you will need to have solutions over and about tech as well. So today, just providing a solution that can just help process a transaction in, say, 888 milliseconds, or, that's a wow, okay? How do I move the money? Today, when I'm actually going and doing, say, corridors from, say, Europe into Africa, there are some exotic currencies which are there, which none of the banks also, touch it because of the volatility, because of, not that much of a demand. Till the time I don't give a efficient forex and liquidity solution along with that, tech will just be pure tech, right? So that's one part. B2B. I mean, today the market size is almost $31.6 trillion, and that's supposed to go up to in excess of 50 trillion by 2032, which is like a whopping 58% jump, but highly regulated, right? Tech can again solve the transaction part of it, but there's a lot of workflow related things, right? When it's regulated, you need a lot of compliance. And I often say that remittance is a business of compliance. Then, of course, money making is the ancillary part to it, right? So cross-border payments, remittances, I think is big. Fraud and risk. I think as we progress into a self-service mode of doing transactions, and I often pick up this dialogue from the Spider-Man movie when Uncle Ben tells Peter Parker that, with great power comes great responsibility. It's your focus that when you are asking people to move into a self-service mode, you have to give them the assurance that all these are happening in a very safe and secure manner. One bad experience and then that person is never going to come back. And today the fraudsters are also very intelligent, right? So they also come up with very innovative ways, and you have to put, if not at least a deterrence in place so that, the black ships are kept away from the ecosystem. Third, I think, is the embedded finance. I mean, I'm very gung-ho about the fact that in the coming years, just like how UPI has democratized the entire payment ecosystem, right, where it's a four-party model, I can have an app of one player linking a bank account of, a different bank and then sending money to a fourth bank. I think embedded finance is something that can bring in a revolution as far as banking is concerned. Mind you, India is a very young population now. So a lot of them would like to get the best products from different banks without actually going into the real estates of each of those banks to do that transaction. So I think that is definitely one area which I think people are experimenting, but you also need those tailwinds from the regulations as well. So the regulatory refresh is something which is definitely there. And last but not the least, I think when we talk about going global and being part and parcel of the different ecosystems, I think compliance as a service can be a big, big differential, because trying to co-create bespoke products as per compliance regulations of every geography is an overkill. So if someone can build a very robust solution of taking the care of the compliance part, then people can actually build better use cases and products in different geographies without worrying about, trying to create those very heavy investments as far as compliance piece is concerned. So I think these four areas look very promising. There have been efforts put in, but I guess we still have to wait for another half a decade at least to see some success.
Sure. Thanks. Arif, I
Bhavik.
know you want to add something
I
on
know,
it, right?
so,
Like, so please go ahead.
Since I'm the only guy on the panel wearing sneakers, I think I can again go off grid, right?
No problem.
So, look at it, right? I mean, like, why do international or global entities take India tech? Cost arbitrage, right? Again, it's low in the value system, right? What would cost them $100 to build there or support, etc., can be done at 75, 80, right? And increasingly, that parity is coming down, right? And that's a good part because we are growing, right? So again, it's a value where you are in the value system, right? For example, one good example I can think of where I think Indian companies have really started doing well is in the auto industry, right? So whether it's a Bajaj or whether it's Mahindra, it's now trying to export to many countries with the EV, etc. I think they've cracked it. What it comes down to is deep tech, right? Unless you have deep tech, right? Like, so there was this company, I forgot their name, who wrote the off-chain, this thing, right? And I think that's the only one in India who's done it. They are doing very well, right? So how many deep tech companies do we have which can really go out there and create value? I think we have to encourage this, right? And Bhavik, we all attend GFF, right? It's a great event, etc. How many such events do we attend? Tell me an event where you have been where there will be a lot of hackathons and all those kind of things. A deep tech conversation, right? A real deep geek conversation. Very rarely do we have it. I think we need to encourage that. It's not about me. It's not about you. We all like what, 45, 50 types, right? I think it's the next generation, right? Our kids coming out. I think we need to tell them that, dude, you have to really hack it deep, right? And I think the challenge is sometimes being the country and the society we are, we try to control too much. For example, AI or blockchain, right? Because it got associated with Bitcoin. We didn't do enough on that front, right? We didn't do enough on the distributed side. But that's where the future is. You spoke about embedded, right? Embedded is going to ride on distributed finance, which means that we need to probably have a chain of our own or writing our own chain DLT protocol, right? I think NPCI did a fantastic thing, NPCI and RBI, with experimenting with CBDC and doing whatever they are. I don't know what the scale is. But I think those are the things we need to invest more in. I think if we do that, when the tide shifts, we'll be there. That's my
very quickly, and I'll let you in. Just very quickly, just to say, India's got massive educational advantages over many countries, and what you're allowing to happen is countries steal the talent. So if you talk about the US, a lot of senior CEOs in the US are Indian. So if you want to make India great again, bring them back with incentives and stop letting them go to other countries, and then you'll get the businesses that you want here as well. So talent is so important to this. Keep them here.
Understood. Ramesh sir, your views on that?
I have a slightly different view. His is a very tech, and which is very important. But I think cross-border payments will grow with exports from India, very clearly. As we sharpen our exports, whether it be cars, whether it be other stuff, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to grow. And in the new scheme of things, with the geopolitical situation as it is, like for example, I read an article where our e-commerce companies exported about $1.2 billion, right? Vis-a-vis China that exported $250 billion, right? And I've seen within Worldline that, and when now that business has stopped, the Russia corridor for Alibaba sale is a humongous one. People in Russia buy, using Worldline as a payment service provider, stuff from Alibaba during the sale. Similarly, and I did read that the government is putting together a plan to grow this e-commerce exports to something like 200 billion over the next 6-7 years. And they've identified 4 key things. First is the e-commerce marketplaces themselves. What can they export? Second is logistics. How do you deliver the good there? Third, they've interestingly named payments as an important leg. And the fourth one is obviously regulations in each of these countries. And they're trying to put together a plan at a government level to see how we can do this, right? Even Amazon, I've read, exported $1 billion outside India last year. So I think if we get this going, it's a huge boost for all these 4, the e-commerce marketplaces themselves, the payment players, and the logistics service providers. It opens a huge market for us to sell physical goods as well as digital goods, right? and build cross-border payments, which we have done already, which is an overseas foreign merchant selling to India and Indian merchant selling overseas. Right? We've already built this as a corridor with our parent company. And there's so many corridors you could build. India Far East corridor, India Middle East corridor, India US corridor, India Britain corridor. All these will lead to a lot of Indian goods and services getting exported and maybe even consumed by the local population. I think if we get there, it will be a tremendous boost to the economy as well as a tremendous boost for all the people involved in the value chain. And I think if the government really is, I read this in the press that the Directorate General of Foreign Trade is working on this. If they can get it together, there's no reason why we can't export everything, including what Arif said, UPI, successfully, instead of just riding, as he explained, through a regulator or through an aggregator, right? Successfully drive our payment stack globally. It'll open up huge amount of business. And I've seen this myself, the kind of stuff that happens in the Alibaba sale, it's enormous. Across the world, they've opened up corridors and doing all these things. And there's no reason why, in the new scheme of things, we cannot aspire to build something like that, right? Build out, export, and automatically Indian systems will follow along with the trade and become popular globally.
Understood. Thank you, Ramesh. So I think just to sum it up and reflect, and everybody in this room on the stage agrees that there is a huge opportunity for India to the world in fintech. But we have to start from taking baby steps, like what Arif said, starting with the deep tech, building the real technology, be it a programmable money or just putting our place over there and start building these protocols. It's a long-term investment, and hopefully we will I would say in 1 or 2 years' time, hopefully we can have a fintech unicorn from India for the world. I think that will inspire a lot of entrepreneurs to continue working on this. Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we are a bit out of time. Do we have time for 1-2 questions? Yeah, so we'll take the questions from the panel offline. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We would love to appreciate and thank you all for your presence with presenting our mementos, requesting Vikrant sir to kindly do the honors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause. What an interesting and insightful session this was. Thank you once again, everyone. A quick picture, requesting everyone to just squeeze in. Thank you.